The following is an AZPM original production.
For AZPM, I'm Mark McLemore, and this is Arizona Spotlight. Coming up, meet journalist Alexander Hefner and learn what makes his political interview series, Breaking Bread, different from the rest. Learn how a Southern Arizona hospital has been helping patients to heal and ease their anxiety using art and music. The story of how it all started for the famed author Luis Alberto Urrea. And a Stories That Soar that was written as a collaboration between an entire second grade class about the concept of love. Those stories are next on Arizona Spotlight. Next, AZPM's Katya Mendoza talks with journalist Alexander Hefner about his public affairs docuseries Breaking Bread with Alexander. The show attempts to explore what is most important to select elected officials and their constituents, beginning with a shared meal. The hope is to bring some humanity back into political discussion. Alongside his grandfather, journalist Richard Hefner, Alexander Hefner co-authored a documentary history of the United States, published by Penguin Random House. Hefner is also the host of The Open Mind on PBS and has written for The Washington Post, Time, and Reuters.
At a glance, it looks like you have interviewed and been interviewed a lot. Tell me about your experiences covering American culture, politics, and civic life. What have you learned so far?
I've learned that our political system is dysfunctional, but that there are a lot of voices that want to uplift our democracy, even if it's only in the green room, as we say in broadcast, or behind closed doors in the smoke-filled rooms. People do want to have a functional democracy. And so most of my journalistic career has been spent imagining, let's say, alternative or innovative formats for doing this type of work, because the existing infrastructure does not yield the outcomes that most Americans want.
In the green room, behind closed doors, what do you mean by that?
If you engage in conversation over a meal, or over activities that are fun, that people enjoy doing, you'll enter a different orbit when it comes to political discussions. And they won't be as much about theater and posturing for election or re-election, or triangulating to, win over this base or this constituency of voters. It will just be more of a genuine meeting of minds. We have the deepest conversations over meals, and that's what this series, Breaking Bread, aspires to tap into. Politics has been, so demonized, has become a dirty word, and my whole endeavor here was to try to make it something that will gravitate towards, not against.
How have the lessons that you've learned across your journalistic career informed your current reporting style and what you take away from some of these interviews that you have?
I would say even before the pandemic hit, part of me was realizing the limitations of a studio where you see yourselves being filmed. Oftentimes for guests, that's an awkward experience if they haven't done it before. My show has been different in providing an in-depth platform rather than a quick hit on cable. Breaking Bread was an evolution of my recognition that, I wanted to go out into the field, even if it was 120 degrees. And it was close to that when I recorded with Senator Kelly for our doc episode, the documentary style interviews we've done now with 20 plus governors and senators. You just feel the oxygen differently than in a studio.
You're meeting your interviewees where they're at. How might a viewer respond to that differently, or how might they benefit, seeing these people in their worlds, in their settings?
It's a great question. I think I would point to our episode with Senator Kelly and also our episode with Governor Pillen of Nebraska as examples of this. So in the episode with Senator Kelly, we go in a jet after our Sonoran hot dogs. It's kind of an interesting order of things to do. I'm glad that the food stayed down. Hot dogs are great. It's Senator Kelly's favorite hot dog stand. And there had been, I think, that month, another one of these warning stories about Arizona will soon not have access to water. We can't build anymore. Whether Senator Kelly is just wanting to represent the optimism of his people, he rebuffed that kind of contention of the idea, that Arizona in this decade or even 5 decades from now might become unlivable. When you see life actually carrying on, there was a story in the Atlantic you probably read about what Phoenix and Arizona are like in the future of America. You can too quickly dramatize the factor of heat, for example, to make some kind of grandiose theses about what it means, and it doesn't sit well with people, and I can understand that. And having experienced, it was over 110 at times when I visited, you can get through it. You can get through that temperature, especially in the dry heat. I don't know if you could get through it with the humidity, but in the same respect with Governor Pillen, you can understand from a very logical basis the opposition to loose gun laws, and you can understand the necessity of gun safety measures. But until you go to Nebraska and see how that pastime, how that recreation plays out, and the joy that it brings, in this case it was Governor Pillen, his staff, and his son who was there for the production, you just can't articulate that as a political point. And so, I think there are everyday considerations that we're missing because politicians often exploit the extremes.
Going back to your interview with Senator Kelly, you discussed how he's one of a handful of senators who have served in the military. You asked him about his experiences and how they may influence his decision-making. His wife, former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, the Chiricahuas, that sort of thing. What surprised you the most about him or what he had to say?
When someone is a hero, and I consider both him and Gabby Giffords heroes, there's some kind of feeling, how can I relate to this person? I have not braved what they have. But then again, I find breaking bread is different than interviewing. I could interview anyone. It was a surprise that both Senator Kelly and Senator Thune in season 1 were very on edge about China and Taiwan and the potential for more geopolitical conflict. And so I think if in fact that's true and we're, just one bad diplomatic move or one kind of bellicose act away from not 2 but 3 geopolitical crises involving the major powers, so Ukraine, Russia, Palestine, and Israel, I think I was taken aback again, as I was with Senator Thune, on the fragility of this moment and the kind of lack of awareness from the public that there could be more looming tumult and chaos. And then, interpersonally, I would just say meeting a hero who doesn't take a day for granted and being at ease in the humanity that he demonstrates, that was encouraging and possibly surprising too, that when you meet someone who acts heroically, who is a hero, and who is also a person of the people and wants to get along just like anybody else, that's inspiring to me.
What would you want the audience to take away from this show?
That if you start from the basics of our humanity, that is a better path than polarized media, hate speech, bigotry, all the biases and stereotypes that are projected on every side of the pendulum. That's the biggest takeaway. That's what I would hope people would harness.
Well, thank you so much, Alexander, for your time. I appreciate you sharing this with me.
Thank you for your thoughtful questions.
Katya Mendoza spoke with journalist, author, and host Alexander Hefner. Season 2 of Breaking Bread with Alexander debuts on July 4th on the PBS webpage 13.org. With a few exceptions, nobody wants to go to the hospital. It puts you in your most vulnerable place while you depend on delicate medical care from the valuable team members who provide it. But in some cases, that team could be even larger than you expect, including not only doctors and nurses, but artists, photographers, and musicians. Next, Tony Paniagua talks with Lauren Rabb, the curator of the Tucson Medical Center's Healing Art Program, which is currently celebrating its 10th year.
Lauren Rabb, the curator of Tucson Medical Center's Healing Art Program. Thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, and you have a major anniversary coming up. Can you tell us about that, please?
We do. We were established in 2014, and so this year is our 10th anniversary. Pretty excited about it.
How did the whole concept or idea come up for this program?
It was originally the brainchild of a gentleman named Len Corris and his wife Doris. Len, unfortunately, has since passed, but Doris is still very active, and he just thought it would be a great idea if collectors at the time in particular had a place where they could leave their art, when their estates were being made smaller or they were passing away or their children didn't want to deal with the hundreds of works of art they may have collected. And so he thought, wouldn't it be great to have it go to hospitals? And he brought the idea to Michael Duran, who was the head of the TMC Foundation at the time. And Michael looked around and said, we have 8 miles of hallway, so this would be awesome. Let's see if we can get this going.
8 miles of potential gallery space at TMC.
Yes, and that is only the main hospital, meaning we also do all of the ancillary clinics. We do TMC ones. We just put art into the new Rincon Hospital, our new hospital at Houghton and Drexel, which will hopefully open in a couple of months. So, yeah, it's a lot.
I was looking at some of the paintings, and they are simply amazing. Desert landscapes, birds, farms. They take you to Paris, to Turkey, other parts of the world. It's also, to me, a really nice way to get exposure to many places and topics that I hadn't thought about.
We're very thoughtful about where we place the art. Like, for example, a lot of those images that you saw of foreign countries, those are in pre-anesthesia testing. And the concept is the people going there are getting testing before they have surgery. And sometimes it's hard for them to see beyond the surgery. So we're trying to remind them that they're going to have life after and they're going to be able to travel again. Those kinds of things are what we think about when we place artwork. And we have a tremendous amount of photography. The general rule of thumb is that when you're not feeling well, the best thing you could see is a beautiful landscape. But if you can't look out the window and see a beautiful landscape, then the next best thing is a beautiful landscape photograph.
I would have never thought about doing something like that, but as you say, gives them an idea or hope that there will be something after this surgery.
Yeah, and a lot of these ideas come from the staff themselves. I try to be very collaborative with the staff and let them have a lot of say and decision making about what art they're going to get. I don't want to ever just impose some artworks in some unit without the staff having buy-in.
What are the benefits that have been described as far as having this art in settings like hospitals?
Well, I'm really glad you asked that because there's actually a tremendous amount of research that talks about how art can be calming and soothing, can focus people's attention away from whatever they're going through. And then since we also have a very active music program, which is something we started just a couple of years after the program got established, we have live musicians that play for patients. And as I was saying, there is a ton of research out there. I think that at this point in history, everyone pretty much recognizes that that is a thing, art and music, and how helpful it is, but that doesn't necessarily mean that every hospital steps up and does something about it. I can give you one perfect example. I have a musician, Katie Baird, who plays viola. She was playing for a woman who has cancer and had just gotten a very serious diagnosis about her prognosis, and it wasn't good, and she was in a tremendous amount of pain. And she asked Katie to come into her room and play for a while, and she told her that was the first time in hours she had not been in pain.
Lauren, what are some of the favorite instruments, if you will, or types of music for the patients there?
Everyone who plays in the units plays a string instrument. So we have harp, we have classical guitar, we have viola, violin. When people are playing a string instrument live, it actually has a vibration. And that vibration actually can transfer kind of into someone who's really listening hard. They can feel it inside themselves. And so we have found that string instruments have the most ability to really get inside people and make them feel better. We do have a piano in the lobby, and we have some volunteer pianists that play that on a fairly regular basis.
There's a lot of psychology and thoughtfulness that goes into this program.
Yes, and as I mentioned, there's just so much research. I didn't have to invent any of this. It was all out there for me to find.
And what is your background, Lauren, and how did you discover this program? Why did you decide to get involved?
Well, I have a master's degree in art history, and I've worked in the art world my entire career. I was at the UA Museum of Art. I was the curator there for a while, and then when I left, Len Corris, who I mentioned earlier, was the founder. He approached me, and he really, really wanted me to come do this job. And at first I wasn't really sure about it because I'd never even considered that I would ever work in a hospital, and I was pretty intimidated by the concept. But, I quickly saw that there was going to be so much benefit, and one of the really nice things about working in a hospital environment is that people are really grateful, and they tell you all the time how much they appreciate what you're doing, and that's just not something that happens a lot in the art world, so very, very rewarding.
Lauren, you've been at this job for 10 years. It seems like you really love and value your position.
I really, really love the job. It is definitely the best job I've ever had in the arts. Just because you can actually see the impact of what you do, it's just wonderful to hear from people, from patients, from staff. A lot of staff have told me what a difference it makes. I've had staff members tell me that they came to work at TMC because they like the environment better than other hospitals in town.
Lauren Rabb, she is the curator of Tucson Medical Center's Healing Art Program. Thank you very much for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thanks.
For photos of some of the artwork at Tucson Medical Center, you can visit the Spotlight page at azpm.org. I've had the pleasure of interviewing award-winning, best-selling author Luis Alberto Urrea twice before for Spotlight, and much like his writing style, his personality is warm, friendly, and funny. I wanted to share this excerpt from one of our conversations where Luis Alberto Urrea shares his undying love for the first author that truly recognized his potential, the pioneering science fiction writer Ursula K. Le Guin. And it also tells how Luis gave his first autograph.
I was in college. It was 1977. My father had just died terribly in Mexico. And, it was kind of in a very lost place. And I didn't know how to deal with it except to write about it. And at the same time that I was struggling with this, Le Guin was brought in as a guest faculty member at University of California, San Diego. And I gave the story about my father's death to my professor, who was responsible for bringing Le Guin. And he took my story to her. This was unbeknownst to me. I had no idea what was going on. So he told me, she wants to meet you and talk about your story. I thought, damn, man, I can't do this. So my professor took me to the apartment they'd rented for her in La Jolla. And it was to me like the inside of the album cover for Led Zeppelin 4, where the acolyte is climbing a cliff, to the wizard. That was what it was like. She was upstairs. And I walked up thinking, I'm going to die. I had never met anybody famous. That was it. And the door opened, and I didn't know what I expected, but there was this pixie standing there. She was quite tiny, and she had that famous sort of page boy haircut, going gray. But the thing that just flabbergasted me was not only did in one hand she have what looked like a highball or some sort of whiskey with a couple of rocks, in the other hand, she had a pipe, like a meerschaum pipe, and she was puffing away on it. It's very Gandalf. And she looked at me and she said, Luisito, like that. And I thought, oh my God, man. And she said, come in. She had the mimeograph, which should date me, on the table of the story. And she said, "Tell me about your father's death." So I started babbling. And she listened, and she said, "Now tell me about you." So I, told her some things about myself. And she said, I really like your story. And I said, "Oh, that's so great. Thank you." And she said, I would like to buy it. And to point out how naive I was at the time, I said, "Well, why do you want to buy it? You already have it right there." And she said, "No, Luisito, no. I want to publish it. I'm editing an anthology." And I thought, "Are you serious?" And so that's how our relationship began. It was a book called Edges, one of those pocket books, back when books were 75 cents.
You bet.
And, the story around that has always made me so happy because, my friends weren't intellectual guys or even literary guys. They were mostly rock musicians or wannabe rock musicians. And we hung out in a donut shop, Winchell's Donuts. And, we were hanging out in the donut shop, a couple of us, and one of the dudes came in. And he's like, "Dudes, the dude over here's book is totally in the bookstore, man." And we all freaked out. "What?" "Yeah, it's down at Walden Books, dude." So we got in his van and we went down there. I was flabbergasted that it was out, and there it was.
Yeah.
And all the dudes bought one.
Excellent.
And that's where my career started, because we're in line, and each guy who bought it would turn to me and say, "You got to sign it, man." And as I was signing these paperbacks for my homies, I thought, "This is really good. This is cool stuff, man." And there were 6 of us total. And when I was signing the 5th book, someone tapped me on the shoulder, and I looked, and it was a mom, a suburban mom buying something. And she said to me, "Excuse me, are you somebody?" Well, what a weighted question that was. And I said, "Yes, I am." And she bought one. And that was the first autograph I'd ever given to a stranger. Yeah, Ursula's hand always on me.
That was a story about how it all got started for acclaimed best-selling novelist and poet Luis Alberto Urrea. The Tucson nonprofit Literacy Connects sponsors a professional group of performers and musicians called Stories That Soar. Their mission is to help young writers realize the potential of bringing their stories to life. It's the first Thursday of February, and this new Stories That Soar was written as a collaboration between an entire second grade class. When they were asked, "What does the word love mean to you?" the students decided to remind us all.
Lovely lines.
Lovely lines.
Lovely lines.
Lovely lines.
Lovely lines.
Lovely lines.
Lovely lines. Love is the sun. It keeps me warm.
Love is a teddy bear. It makes me feel love.
Love is when my friends help me.
Hey, are you okay?
Let's help you up.
Thanks.
Love is cousins. They love you and help you.
Love is hugs when you need them, and your family gives them to you.
We love you so much, sweetie, and we're always here for you.
Love is food. You can eat it with your family.
Love is my dog. Come here, boy. Come here. He's a good boy. I love him, and he loves me too.
Love is loving others.
Love is kind.
Lovely lines.
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 That audio creation was composed by a second grade class at Robison Elementary. Go Roadrunners! The voices were all by middle school students studying acting, film, and radio production at Literacy Connect's Youth Center. Remember, aspiring student-age writers can submit their stories now to the Magic Box Story Portal at literacyconnects.org. Thank you for listening to Arizona Spotlight. This show is a production of AZPM. The production engineer is Jim Blackwood. Production assistance by Alicia Vasquez. I'm producer and host Mark McLemore.
AZPM podcasts are made possible in part by donations from listeners like you. Learn more at support.azpm.org. Thank you.